Hello there, David Gibson here from Thackeray Williams Leasehold team. I am doing a video because there have been some recommendations for changes to the law that have come out in a Law Commission report overnight. They could be big changes for leaseholders. In particular, the changes to rules on lease extensions are something that we've been reviewing quite closely, on the proposals for these changes, I should say. They're not actually enforced, and there's no guarantee they will come through at all or in their current form, but it's recommended by the Law Commission that these changes are made. So it's definitely worth considering and worth having an eye on if you are a leaseholder who may need to extend their lease or currently needs to, particularly because there are some changes recommended there that are quite helpful potentially for leaseholders. One of them is that, well, the current rules for lease extensions say that when you make a claim, you get 90 extra years on top of your existing lease and you buy out your ground rent. That's the only type of statutory lease extension that you can, claim as a leaseholder. These changes vary that a bit. First of all, they change it to adding 990 years onto your lease. So when this comes through, there'll be a longer lease extension. There isn't yet firm guidance on whether this will mean that you have to pay more or how that's going to change in terms of how much you pay for the regime to do that, but it's a longer lease extension, and generally speaking it would mean that you would only need to do one unless you're exceptionally long-lived. It wipes out the prospect really of doing multiple lease extensions if you're going to extend it for a term that long. So that's one change, one recommended change. The other recommendations are that there's two other types of claim that you should be able to make now. One of them is that you can make a separate claim to just buy out your ground rent. So for those people who are stuck in a situation where their lease term is fine, but their ground rent is high enough that lenders now consider it onerous, or it's got doubling provisions that they're not happy with, or buyers aren't happy with, so they can't remortgage or sell or struggle to do so, you'd be able to make a separate claim just to buy out the ground rent, not to pay for the extension of the lease. So it could get some people who are currently stuck in hot water out of that, which would be beneficial, because those rules on ground rent and lenders' conditions for them have developed in recent years, become tighter and more stringent. Everyone's lending a lot more cautiously on higher ground rent, so it's a problem for some people where it wasn't when they bought their flat. Again, that's something that could change with these recommendations. That's helpful for leaseholders. As well as that, there's another option being proposed, that if you have a very, very high ground rent, you should be able to extend your lease without buying out the ground rent, i.e. you leave it as it is. So people who have that very high ground rent, they're actually okay with that, or it's so high that they can't afford to do a buyout, they would be able to leave it in place for the duration of their lease extension. So they'd be able to extend their lease, keep their interest in the property, and keep paying that ground rent, and keep it as it is without having to get together a lot of capital at the outset. So you'll be able to split it up effectively, do a lease extension at one stage, do a ground rent buyout at another, or vice versa. So major developments. The report itself is 860 odd pages long, so it's going to be a few videos to deal with all the proposed consequences of these changes, and we'll be putting out some guidance for leaseholders as well. One big question that a lot of leaseholders will be asking is, well, if it's going to go to 990 years rather than 90 years added on, should I be making my claim when these changes come through? And the answer is, if you're currently in possession of a shortish lease, i.e. you've got about 80 years or so remaining, even a little bit more than that, you may want to consider using the current regime to extend your lease and protect yourself. The reason being that these changes may not come through quickly, they may not come through in their current form, they may not come through at all, and they may come through with other addendums that make it less kind of appetizing to make this new type of claim. For example, if it was a 990-year lease extension and it's, the final version of that says that you need to pay considerably more for your extra years there, then you might end up slightly kicking yourself if you could have bought 90 and that's all you needed now. Again, these changes aren't set in stone. There's lots of theoretical changes that could come through in time, so the only advice we can really give for the time being is that if you have a lease that's approaching 80 years, you use the current regime, you protect yourself. The further you get from that 80-year mark, and if you're not currently selling, then watch this space effectively, see what changes come through, and see whether there's something better that comes through in the current years that you could take advantage of at that point to protect yourself and improve your position. There'll be plenty more videos to follow, I'm sure, as there's lots of other changes coming through as a result of these proposals from the Law Commission. So yeah, watch this space.